Hello again, and welcome to our the next installment of our Counselor Coffee. This is where we're going to be talking with our freshman team about some of the curriculum issues that are going on, giving a broad overview of what's happening. Maybe we could just have a couple of brief intros from the CM team. Do you want to say hello and sort of what your area is? Carl, do you want to start?
Sure, thanks, Jack. My name is Carl Danso. I'm the vice principal for grades 9 through 12 at CM. This is my second year back at CM. I graduated from CM in 2004, right? 2004. So I'm excited to be back.
Awesome. I'll jump in next. Hi, I am Caitlin Corsano. I teach English to 9th and 10th grade here at CM. So if your son is in the honors track, I have him in person for English. And if he is in the CP track, I have him online for English. So I see all of the 9th grade boys. And I'm also the moderator of the National Honor Society. This is my 6th year here at CM.
And hello, everyone. My name is Megan Leahy. I am a principal fellow at CM. This is my first and only year working with everyone here. I'm having a wonderful time. And I also teach a lovely section of Spanish too. And so I do have quite a few 9th graders in that section.
And just to introduce myself again, I'm Jack O'Keefe. I'm the Director of Counseling and Student Success. I'm also the varsity assistant with our basketball team. I came up through the teaching ranks here, so I've taught English, I've taught history here. I think I was briefly in the theology department, but I think that lasted less than a month. And so I've been in a lot of different places. Also, I oversee our advisory program. The goal of today is definitely, hey, I'm a freshman parent. Things are a little bit new. Let's talk about what the strategies are, especially because we don't have some of those natural organic meetings that we might have in a normal year. So we're going to try to address any concerns that you might have while giving a broad overview of kind of what's coming up. And Caitlin, maybe we could start with you a little bit because you're mostly, of the four of us who are on right now, you're the one who's in the classroom the most. Could you give us just kind of when you look at Q2, what is English looking like for the next 3 weeks and when we come back from the break?
Absolutely. So what we just finished was American Born Chinese. That was the graphic novel that the bright yellow one that you probably saw your son working on. And the boys finished doing a project on that right before Thanksgiving, where they had to create their own comic and then write a couple of paragraphs about it. They did a really nice job. They're all up around the school building. If the school building was open, I wish you could see them. They look great, but I've gotten lots of compliments from other teachers walking by. So that was sort of the beginning of Q2, was finishing up that unit. Then as Q2 moves forward, pretty much the whole rest of this quarter, we're going to be reading Goodbye Days, bright blue book that I left in the other room. Otherwise, I would hold it up. But Goodbye Days is a contemporary novel. It was just published 3 years ago. It's very high interest. It is telling the story of a boy who is dealing with his 3 best friends' deaths and how to overcome that. And so there's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of heady topics to discuss that I think are going to be really great for the boys. What is coming up assessment-wise as we look through the rest of the second quarter? They're going to have a pretty big quiz the last week before Christmas on all of the grammar stuff that they've learned in their online classes. So we're going to be going over run-on sentences, comma usage, capitalization, colons, all of that good stuff. So they're going to have a quiz on all of the grammar that'll be coming up. And then there will be a poem that they're going to be writing, a bio poem they're going to be writing the week we come back from Christmas. So that first week back, we're kind of going to be jumping into another assessment based on the reading they do at home. They're going to be reading a couple chapters over Christmas. And then I think the last week of the quarter, we're going to be prepping for their Goodbye Days essay. We'll be working on the essay, but it probably won't be graded until Q3. So that's sort of where we are heading in an English class.
Awesome. And I just saw Brian Mulcahy, who is one of our biology teachers and the head of our science department, hop on. Brian, could you introduce yourself and kind of give us a brief snapshot of what science is going to look like over the next few weeks?
Sure. So hi, everyone. I'm Brian Mulcahy. I'm as Mr. Keefe said, I'm the science chair. In terms of, I guess we'll start with the 9th grade bio, right? So bio is, we're going to be basically trying to incorporate several different themes, including cell division, cell respiration, cell parts into a key 2-3 labs to kind of like really kind of blend them all together. And that's what we're trying to do essentially with most of the courses that we're offering within the science department this year, is kind of take the most important things, given the time constraints now with our minimal touch points, and also find a way just to integrate them in a more real world kind of, way, I guess is the word I'm trying to say.
A real world way works for me. I think sort of having those links works. Megan, what about in Spanish, and obviously you have a little bit of a split because you teach Spanish. We have a Latin program, we have Mandarin. Like, as best as you can, what does language assessment and the rest of the quarter look like?
Sure. So let's see, for Spanish 1, Spanish 2, we are working with, in Spanish 1, your son's being introduced to a lot of fundamentals of language and language study. There's all these great little systems and tricks and ways to learn a language. And so though we're kind of trying to lay those foundations. And then in level 2, I'm building on what the students have experienced in Spanish 1 here at CM and getting more in depth into different kinds of tenses that are a little more complex, building on vocabulary. I think that Latin is likely the same. Again, it's starting the trend of starting with fundamentals, getting to know systems, and then working on communication from a speaking perspective and writing perspective as well. Assessment wise, it's sort of, in my class, I'm working with the other Spanish 2 teachers as well to focus on sort of like micro assessments to check in and make sure that things have stuck in students' minds. Things from the spring, we are recycling and reusing those skills, and we're building on them as we add on some more complex stuff. And so my like bite-sized assessments are ways in which we can kind of quickly know what they've learned, what they've retained, and then if we need to pivot to revisit something. And so that's all that I know. If you have any more questions, I highly recommend you reach out to your son's language teacher.
And we are going to have time for Q&A at the end. I'll throw that in too. And what's great about everyone at CM, a lot of people wear multiple hats. So we literally, half the team was doing a scholar's presentation. I feel like we're pulling everyone in from the bullpen right now. So Vin Bradley, who's the chair of our social studies department, our history department, and also a global studies teacher, he just hopped on the call. Katie Rich is now here from theology. Vin, could you give us like a little bit of a snapshot about history, and then maybe Katie will pivot to you?
Sure. So global studies is a case-based curriculum focused on non-Western culture. First semester, we looked at Africa, and students are in the midst of wrapping up a unit on South Africa. And we're in the process now of pivoting in the weeks before the holidays, Christmas and the New Year, to revisiting Invictus, book about Nelson Mandela and rugby and sort of the demolition of the apartheid system. And students had read over the summer, parents may remember, on the first 6 chapters, and that was intentional to kind of dig into the book, knowing that we were going to be operating in a hybrid manner, and kind of giving us a little bit of a head start, as well as within the environment with Nelson Mandela as a sort of a exemplar of character, and with the social justice environment in the country, we just thought it would be a great summer read. So we're going to jump into that, and that's what we're focusing on prior to the holidays. And students will wrap up the last, I think, 4 chapters over Christmas break, a modest amount of reading. And then when we come back after the holidays, students will write an essay kind of coming from that book. So using that book as sort of a springboard to weigh in on the different issues associated with Mandela and apartheid and the rise of a democratic South Africa. So we're excited about that, and listening to Ms. Leahy, we'll have some kind of smaller assignments, sort of reading checks, just to gauge how students are doing in terms of their comprehension, and then adjusting instruction going forward from there. So pleased to be on the call. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. And then Katie, do you just want to give a quick introduction and then talk a little bit about what theology looks like over the next few weeks?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Katie Rich. It's wonderful to see the faces of some parents. One thing I really miss this year is just getting to meet families in person and getting to interact with you. So it's wonderful to see you and put a face to the name to many parents that I've been emailing back and forth with over the year. So thank you for being here. We are currently wrapping up sort of in the middle of Unit 4 in theology, which is the same unit we're in English with Miss Corsano and Miss Messenger, which is our unit on responsibility. So we've been discussing, we're working our way through the Old Testament. We're up into the 8th book of the Bible right now, the book of Ruth, where the boys are learning about a very hope-filled story of an Israelite who was faithful to God in a time that it was really difficult to be faithful. So we're talking about sort of how to maintain faith in times that are difficult, which is obviously very timely right now. We just started the season of Advent, of course, leading up to Christmas. So we're talking about how this period of waiting for the coming of Jesus is relevant in our time of waiting for a vaccine, waiting to play sports that we miss, waiting to do activities or to see loved ones we haven't seen in a long time, and sort of connecting this liturgical season of Advent where we wait with the waiting that we are all doing in our personal lives. So really trying to connect the content of the class with what the boys are experiencing in life. Before Christmas, we're going to dive into the Psalms, which will be a new genre for them in the Bible. We're going to talk about how the Psalms are songs that are communal songs that sort of express what a community is going through. And they're going to study the structure of the Psalms as poetry. So sort of tying it back to their unit on the crossover at the beginning of the year in English. They have familiarity with some of those structures and literature devices, poetic devices. So we'll study the Psalms as poetry going into Christmas, which I think will be a fun connection to a lot of the songs that they love. They love listening to music that relates to their lives, much as people throughout history have written songs or psalms that have made it into the Bible that connect to their community. So we'll study the Psalms before Christmas. And then when we come back from break, they're going to work with Michael Monroe, our music teacher here, and do a cross-curricular project where they're actually writing a song themselves on technology that I wouldn't know how to teach them. So I'm really excited for Michael to join us as the music instructor. So we have a lot going on in theology, and it's been a wonderful fall so far.
That's awesome. I'm not writing any Psalms, but it would be great if I was. And I think pulling that all together, that's a great sort of some nuts and bolts about what's going to happen in each discipline over the next few weeks. Carl, maybe in your role, you and I, and Megan obviously as well, we sort of see the 30,000 foot. Like if you're talking to a parent about developing some organizational strategies with their son over the next 6 weeks, how would you advise them to take all the data that we just heard from each of these teachers to kind of make it into a cohesive plan moving forward?
Yeah, no, it's a really great point, Jack. One of the things you were alluding to is that the second quarter is really compartmentalized. We have that time before Thanksgiving, then we have a few days off. We're back into the rhythm of things for a few weeks now until we'll have that Christmas break. And then we'll come back and finish off quarter two and really the first semester. So it can be really segmented. So especially for students that are a little disorganized, now more than ever, it's like really important to be like vigilant and proactive in all your organizations. So obviously utilizing those things like your planners on campus is always an amazing resource for families, students and parents. And then really being proactive and connecting with your teachers and trying to figure out what are we moving towards, especially in terms of like that summative assessment at the end of the quarter and the end of the semester. One of the ways in which we've changed our structure this year is that we won't be having midterm exams. That has been the case, and we actually had planned that before the COVID craziness has happened. But a part of the thinking was that we lose a lot of instructional time with that traditional exam week. A part of the other reasoning is that, you know, we didn't necessarily have, or we felt like there were better ways to authentically assess students with what we were working towards. So thinking less about an assessment being a 2-hour exam in which you sit down with a pen and paper and fill out true or false questions. Like, that wasn't necessarily an authentic assessment of what we're doing in English. So really the key is, I think, a few things: to be proactive in working with teachers, using those planners, and checking on campus regularly. I would say those are the most important things. And like recognizing, acknowledging that Q2 is so segmented, knowing that, like, okay, this is going to be a little disjointed, so I've got to be on top of everything. Those would be my big suggestions.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Can I add something?
go for it, Megan. Absolutely.
So in addition to all that organization that Mr. Danso was just talking about, budgeting out when students want to complete work, given the hybrid model that we're working with right now, it is, surprise everyone, teenage boys can be procrastinators. Me too. Who knew? But so talking with your son to say, hey, like, do you have a plan of when this is going to happen? When are you going to study for this larger assessment? Or when do you plan on just making sure that those daily assignments are done? Budgeting a time to make sure that those things happen is a great structure that students are kind of missing right now in the part-time virtual model. And the other thing is that I cannot encourage parents enough to utilize on campus as a great information resource. It's an awesome place to start if you're wondering how your son is doing in a class, or if he's missing anything. We try to keep all of that very up to date and full of information. So that's a great place to always check in and then maybe have a conversation with your son.
On the topic of budgeting time, let me just say, and this is coming from some experience, that there are these great mirages in Q2 of, I'm going to get so much done over Thanksgiving weekend, or I'm going to get so much done over Christmas break. And as you probably seen in your household over Thanksgiving break, right? It gets late early, where it's like, oh, hey, isn't it great? We're done on Tuesday, and I've got a couple days off, and and then all of a sudden it's Sunday night, and you've been wearing sweatpants for 4 days and shopping online or whatever else. Like, it'll happen with Christmas. We're in a pandemic. People are stressed. It's okay to take a step back. But like Megan was saying, it shouldn't be, I'm going to do all of my work over the break. I'm going to be working for maybe an hour on this date, and then an hour and a half this date, or half an hour this date, to break it up. And Carl, something you and Megan both touched on, and Caitlin, I would love for you to speak about this a little bit as a classroom teacher. One of the ways that students have always built that in the past is they have that relationship with the classroom teacher, they go for extra help, they come up with a little bit of a plan. And that's one of the hurdles that we're working with this year that we've identified early. But I think we probably all know a lot more now than we knew in July. And when you think of extra help and how you can work with a student, or how you can support a student one-on-one, what have you seen so far that has worked, Caitlin, or what advice would you give for making that connection for a student to a parent who might encourage their kid?
Absolutely. Okay, I have 2 off-topic things at the beginning that I'm going to say first, because why not?
Sure.
One thing, just because we're talking about the holidays here, I wanted to also mention to the parents that your sons are working on a Christmas celebration that's coming up in the next couple of weeks. If your son is red, they'll be presenting this coming Wednesday, a week from today. If they're silver, it'll be 2 weeks from today. But they're going to be presenting a Christmas poem to the class for a quiz grade. So just so you know that that's happening. It'll be fun. Some of them are doing the night before Christmas. It's very cute. The second thing that I wanted to talk about was that time management over Christmas, like what Mr. O'Keefe was just saying. Mr. Bradley said they're going to have a little reading for history. They're also going to have a couple chapters of reading for English. So I would encourage them, if they, want to get a head start on any of that, if they read before Christmas, then they don't have to read during Christmas. So that's a motivational tool that I might use with them. And then specifically to talk about extra help, the best way that I have found to deal with extra help this year is through our Teams platform. It's been really wonderful to have the students be able to reach out to me in the moment when they have the question. And as long as I'm not actively teaching, it's pretty easy for me to say, oh, no, you're confused. We're on chapter 2, not on chapter 3. Or for me to say, oh, you can't see the assignment on campus. Let me check and see if that's a problem on my end or on your end. And so we can really resolve those problems very quickly through that Teams platform, especially, between that can be after school. I think a lot of teachers are pretty good about checking their Teams platforms even after the school day ends. So that's a great method. The other thing that I've really found is using the assessment tool on campus. It's really easy for teachers to go and annotate and give feedback on students' writing. And so it's been really helpful for me to be able to go in and leave comments. And then I've taught all of the students how to go back and view those comments. So they all know how to do that. So anytime we have a major writing assignment, they can go look and say, oh, this is the run-on sentence. That's what I have to go back and fix. So that has actually been a great way to deal with the lack of paper. And it's definitely even more efficient than it was in the past. So that's been a great thing.
Great. And Megan, you've done a lot of work this year as well in your fellowship of kind of looking at that extra help and building connections. And, again, maybe in the same way Carla a second ago, from the 30,000 foot, what have we seen as a school, or what do we know now that we didn't know maybe at the beginning of the year when we were coming up with some of the policies about how to deliver extra help?
Well, that's still sort of this ongoing question in my mind of how we can continue to connect with students, even given our schedule and all these restrictions. But like Caitlin, I'm seeing too the use of Teams to connect with students, and it varies. It could be a quick question that happens, but I've seen too like quick calls I have that are maybe like 5-10 minutes to explain something, or just check in with a student about some things that he might be missing, stuff like that. It's just sort of it's a very versatile tool, and it's a super useful platform, and that has been, from what I've seen with teachers, our primary resource given all of our restrictions right now.
Sure. Well, and as we're thinking about those connections, we've been spending a lot of time of like student to teacher and what it looks like there. But obviously, if your son is new and it's his first year at Catholic Memorial and he's building connections on campus, you're also worried about that student to student connection and how we're building those connections in. Katie, you've been one of the instrumental people in our freshman advisory program. You and Carl are advisory partners for the lunch partner or the lunch program. Could you talk a little bit about, how are we building those connections with students on campus? What are you seeing, through that homeroom lunch program? How's that going overall?
Yeah, so I think that's one of the gifts that's come out of our COVID schedule, if we can word it that way, that we have a small group of students that gathers each morning that they're on campus. And then not only do they see each other for 20 minutes to a half hour in the morning, but also for about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour at lunchtime. So the built-in benefit of that is that every single student has a group of 8 to 12 kids that they see twice a day. They see the same teacher every time they have homeroom or lunch. And that, as a teacher, has provided me with the ability to specifically connect with that small group of students. And I think that's pretty standard across the board, that teachers are sort of talking about what a gift it is to get to know students in a setting in the classroom that's smaller and that's not a formal class. One of the benefits of having lunch together is just getting to have those casual conversations. how was your Thanksgiving? What did you do? Because we miss out on those discussions in the hallway these days. We have one-way hallways and we're not supposed to be talking face to face. We're supposed to be all facing the same way. So in that lunch or advisory setting, we get to have those check-ins. And I know that teachers are making an effort to make sure to notice when a student is a little off one day, or taking the opportunity to have those one-on-one check-ins. In terms of the partnership too, Carl and I share a lunch duty. So sometimes he is in my room with my homeroom so that I can go grab lunch at the same time. And that gives the kids an opportunity to connect with a second adult as well. So typically there's 2 adults that check in with each small group of students during that advisory and or lunch block each time they're on campus. That still doesn't fix the sort of challenge that, hey, maybe you don't have any friends in your advisory or lunch group. What I keep telling students is it doesn't really matter whether you came in knowing the kids in your advisory or lunch group. This is your small group, like it or not. And so we are going to build relationships within this group. That's part of the beauty of CM, is we have kids who come from all over, who are from diverse backgrounds, and who may not naturally connect outside of CM, but who are in a situation where they have this shared experience. So again, I think that small group setting is a benefit that's come out of COVID for our school in the advisory and lunch setting, and also in classroom settings. My classes aren't above 16, and I know that a lot of classes, are even smaller than that. So we see that small group pattern this year in a way that we haven't before, that sort of fixes some of, or helps to put a Band-Aid on some of the social challenges that we're seeing during COVID.
And I would say, in the first couple months of the year, there was this real feeling of nobody's really talking to each other, and the building had this eerie quiet. My office shares a wall with Katie, so I could bounce things off the wall right now. We hear each other. But Katie's class, I think it sounded like you were playing a game the other day and people were yelling, and it's coming alive. Like that thaw is happening as it's getting colder outside. Carl, as you think about, kind of again, the big picture, what are some of the other social emotional supports we have on campus? And also, how can a student be involved if, his fall sport ended, or what's coming up in the next couple of weeks in terms of involvement on campus?
Yeah, absolutely. I would just add to what Katie was saying as well. She's a part of a team that has been working very hard to come up with all these sort of community building icebreakers that was very intentional at the beginning of the year for those small groups in the advisory. So that's been great, and it's been a lot of fun. I think we were drawing cartoon Michael Jordan contest the other day. Who can draw the best Michael Jordan cartoon? We watched this video. So it was really cool, and there's a lot of cute things going on there. In terms of just advisory, where are the places to go? Who are the people to connect with? A part of that small group is to make sure that they have at least one person that they can connect to that might not necessarily be a direct teacher that they have, but just that there's another adult in the building that they have gotten a chance to know. And through that, our teachers are also, our advisors rather, are telling our students all the wonderful things that are happening on campus. As we were talking about getting rid of that academy day in the middle of the week in place of another academic day, one of the reasons for that was because we felt with all the extracurricular activities that we had happening after school, we had sort of filled that need. We knew that social emotional, that connection with peers, all of those interactions were so essential to the experience at CM. When we asked the boys, why do you come to school? As much as I'd love for them to say English is the reason I come to school, most of them say I come to school to be with my friends. So we wanted to provide those structured, unstructured time for them. And really, I think, Craig Nigerian, our athletic director, has the numbers, but we have more students than ever participate in extracurricular activities. So between sports and strength and conditioning after school, there's lots of opportunities for clubs like Latin and Spanish clubs that are happening after school. today, if you didn't get a chance to see it, we had an incredible all-school meeting where Matt Callahan talked about his personal experience with mental wellness, specifically as it relates to, masculinity and being a man, and sort of the stigmas of what it means to be a man and not show emotion. And after that experience, our campus ministry, to like follow up on that, it's great to have those conversations, or great to have those speakers. But then our campus ministry also provided a space after school for our boys to come and talk and share their experiences. And I believe we had about 20 plus students there after school, which is great. I mean, I graduated from CM in 2004. I can't remember an opportunity where a faculty member was being vulnerable and sharing their story. And then after school, people got together and talked about their experiences with mental health and well-being. So it's incredible. There's a lot of amazing things happening. And one of the resources is that advisor. And in addition to our counselors, obviously, that this boys can go to. But if your son's like, I don't know what, if there's an issue in trying to connect and find something to do, find a way to be involved, like the counselors are a great entry point to that, as well as their lunch advisors. So now you have the information to say, okay, you don't know anything that's going on, like go talk to your lunch advisor and find out what's going on. They're a great resource.
And, just as Carl was saying with those advisory groups and the work that Katie and some of the other advisors did at the beginning of the year, the counselors were very involved in terms of shaping those groups. So we worked with admissions. We tried to have a very kind of blended groups with some shared interests. So those groups were kind of intentionally built and not, just throwing names on a wall. I would also say in terms of sometimes the counselors are doing a lot more than you might see or that your son might see, where we offered some slots at the beginning of the year to meet your counselor. That's obviously still ongoing. We're available at all times to anybody, but we check in with the advisors often. We sort of see what's going on with them. We help build some of that curriculum. So if you do have a question for a counselor or one of those big picture things, I'm in the middle of the alphabet. So I go from Gaffney to Leo. If your son's name is at the beginning of the alphabet, sort of A through Freiberger, you're with Ms. Kaplan. And if your son's name is at the end of the alphabet, McKinnon to Way, you'd be with Mr. Claiborne. So if you have a question for a counselor at any time, we are here to help. One thing we help with a lot is scheduling and placement for next year and that whole process. Vin and Brian, you're both department chairs. So we start working pretty closely together in about March when that process is moving through. Could you talk a little bit, and maybe Vin, maybe you could get us started. Just how does the course recommendation process work for a student who's in a class right now and is considering, oh no, we lost Vin in the fog. Vin's back. All right. How does that course recommendation work in terms of scheduling for next year?
Pardon me, I have a light in my classroom that goes off. I'm not really in San Francisco, but thank you, Jack. So for our process freshman year, there are a number of options. There's a group of students who will go to AP European History. There's another group of students who will go into honors, and then there's a group of students who will be in college prep. I think it's about finding the right fit for the student, a place where students going to be able to be challenged, but also able to be successful. And so you don't necessarily do justice to a student if they're weighed down sophomore year with a couple of sports and too many AP or honors classes, and then becomes very, very challenging for that student from a time management and stress standpoint, and particularly challenging on the home front with parents. So we're looking at trying to find the right fit for students. Some of that will be decided by grades for sure, but also it's looking at academic skills as well, in particular writing skills. And one of the things that we've talked about as a history department is tracking those skills for the writing process, as well as other skills like reading comprehension. And we might even look, for instance, at how students are doing in the other humanities classes, like English as well as theology, to try to find that best fit for students the next year. And then I think it's also, where do students want to go? So sometimes parents might have an idea of where they want their son to go, but ultimately I think the son has to be interested and engaged in the challenge that they're taking on. And then we work closely with Jack and with the guidance counselors, because they have that holistic view of what's going on in that student's life, the other things that they have going on at school, and how they're going to kind of fit all of that together in a way that challenges them, but is also it's realistic and accomplishable so that they can be successful. It's a fully engaged process. It's team oriented. It's gathering a lot of data from teachers across disciplines, and all for the interest of for the students' well-being. And there is an opportunity for students to advocate for themselves too, and that certainly does take place.
Brian, could you add anything to that from a science standpoint, or math and science maybe, in terms of if a student is currently in a CP class and wants to go to an honors class, or is currently in an honors class and has a larger plans, how does that process work?
Just thinking about from 9th to 10th, we've got to take it, as Vin said, from a couple different approaches, right? So in terms of moving from a CP class to an honors class, we're looking at essentially like mastery at the CP level, and vice versa. If we were going to, let's say, demote, and I hate using that word, I don't even want to use it, so let's say something else. Find a better fit for someone who is in honors that may be with chemistry CP, because they are really two different beasts. We may want to take a look at their grades, not only in biology, but also in math, right? Do they have the ability to do some of those quantitative analyses that they're going to need to do in some of the higher tiered chemistry things? That being said, specifically this year, we have been able to run biology, regardless of CP or honors, with a concurrent schedule. So we are, for example, every class on Thursday, Friday is doing the exact same lab. We've had weekly meetings, and we've been able to scaffold appropriately. So we're really trying to close the gap between what the experience is for CP and what the experience is for honors. And so that process is going to continue in chemistry next year. In fact, like, we're having one of the chemistry teachers join on that Friday meeting this week, just so that they can see how we're assessing the boys. So I don't remember Carl, I was just talking about tests, and other teachers did too. But we've decided just in 9th grade bio this year to make all of our exams take home, but they are a complete application of content. Nothing is look this up on Google and then you've got your answer. It's all apply what you've learned in class. You have access to your notes, but they may not actually help you answer the question unless you're able to analyze it, interpret the data, and come up with your own conclusions using essentially claim, evidence, reasoning behind that. So long story short, when it comes to chemistry, we're going to be continuing to push that application of skill mentality into a lot of how the curriculum is designed for next year. And so I'm going to be having a slightly more heavy-handed approach with the chem crew next year, which is great for the upcoming sophomores. We're also taking a look at integrating more cross-discipline lessons. So something that they have talked about in bio might also be reintroduced with a chemical perspective in chemistry. They might see it again in physics, or it may trickle down from physics and then show up in chemistry, and then they'll see it the year after. So the long story is, like, it's a complicated process, and we're going to try to take every student's individual needs in mind as we move forward.
I think that's great, and it's calling it a complicated process is probably we don't want that to sound minimalistic, but I mean there's a lot of moving parts, and just as a parent, some of the nuts and bolts that go into the process that maybe would be helpful to be aware of. Our teachers typically make those recommendations for the next year in about early February, so like right after the close of the first semester. There's obviously a lot of time left in the year, and in a year like this, hey, things can change. Counselors then do group meetings with students to talk about kind of how the process works. Then the system and on campus is opened up so that you as a parent can sit down with your son and look at his course registrations. As we enter sophomore year, there are a lot of moving parts in our schedule. So what electives might look like or what requirements might look like are still a little bit in flux, but that will all be ironed out by the time they're going through that course registration process in late February, early March. From that point forward, if you're in a situation or your son is in a situation where he was really hoping for that honors recommendation and it just didn't come through and he really thinks he's turning it on, that's a great opportunity. Counselors sit down with students one-on-one, that we build those relationships that way, make some connections to build that schedule. And like Vin was saying earlier, in terms of that whole process and holistically speaking, a counselor could look at something and say, hey, here's a kid who he's crushing it in theology, he's in honors English, he's still in regular global studies, let's say, there's some good signs that some of those skills might be there. For a 15-year-old kid, it might be, if I get, insert grade here, then I should be promoted. It's not really who's doing the most extra credit. It's not necessarily, who turns in the most homework. There is a little bit of, you need to have the grade and the skills on top of it, and whether that's applying it through different labs or applying it through papers that you might see in a humanities course or just classroom participation. There are a lot of things that factor into this decision, and treating your son's counselor as a partner, not opponent, of someone who really wants to come up with the best overall schedule of what's going to work for your son and how he can thrive as a sophomore. That's everyone's goal, especially as hopefully, and there's plenty of good news on the horizon, we're going to see things return to something that looks a little bit more like normal. And so, whatever new skills he has adapted this year, kind of putting those into place as he, adjusts back to what regular used to be. I think with that, we've covered most of the big points that we wanted to hit. I did want to leave some time for parent Q&A here. I know we've got a small but committed group of parents here. By all means, if you have a question for one or several people on the panel that we can speak to and add some clarity, you've got some good helpers here. So you can use the chat or raise your hand or unmute yourself, whatever works.
I have a quick question. Mrs. Corsano, I know you are having your baby, right? Yes.
That was going to be our happy closer, yes.
Yes, so sorry, no, but I was wondering who is taking over for you and how that transition is going to go.
Absolutely. So Connor was not here today because he was a red guy.
Right.
But the silver guys were actually introduced to the new teacher today.
Oh,
So
okay.
Mr. Paul Cady has been here at CM all year. He was working for the first part of the year as a theology teacher here. But when Mr. Array came back, he is now available to teach my English classes, which is awesome. So he and I have been working closely together. I have done pretty much most of the lesson planning for what it's going to look like the rest of the 9th grade while I'm out. But he and I have been talking through that. He's read all of the books. And he's been sitting in the back. So if you check in with Connor, he's been sitting in the back of the class for the last couple of weeks. So on Thursday and Friday, he will be introducing himself to the rest of the classes. And I'm going to have him also teach a class in the next couple of weeks, just so he has a chance to start learning names and getting to know everyone. But we've got the transition sort of all organized. He will be officially starting January 1st. So when we come, or I guess it's the 4th, I think, when we come back. Because baby Corsano is due on New Year's Day.
That's awesome.
So Mr. Cady will be running the class from January until probably April break, I think is the game plan. So that's the rest of quarter 2 and then pretty much the entirety of quarter 3.
Okay, great.
And it's great that your son is a freshman. Caitlin has another long-term sub for her sophomores, who frankly is a little bit shaky. No, I'm kidding.
I'm getting called in from the bullpen. I'm so excited about it. I got the call.
Yeah, Mr. Danso and Mr. Cady are going to be great. Full confidence.
It's going to be good.
Awesome. Can I ask one more thing? I don't want to hog it, but I find it in terms of the extra help. I feel like, and you guys talked a lot about that, but I find math to be one of the hardest ones to do over Teams. And Connor's, they can't stay after, which is another thing. It's just such a bummer. I know that's a bummer for all of you guys, but it's hard. He's in honors math and it's hard, and he's struggling in it. And fortunately, Mr. Sullivan is his homeroom teacher, but it's hard when there's a whole bunch of kids in there and he's like, how am I supposed to, he doesn't want to ask for help in front of all those, you know what I mean? So I don't know if that's something you've thought about, but it's the zooming on doing math. Like I said to my husband, you need someone over your shoulder sitting there doing it with you, and you just can't do that now. So I was wondering if you had any suggestions or something for that.
I mean, my number one suggestion, and Carl, I'll pivot to you in a second. I'm sorry, like we had someone who was going to join us from the math department. There was a last second issue, so we couldn't have them join. Some of those Zoom sessions, like they can work. They don't work as great. That's kind of like the theme of the year, but it's also with Mr. Sullivan. I think one thing that we're trying to work on as a school that we're doing with Men's Health Month is really destigmatizing any form of asking for help, whether it's academic help, whether it's mental health and wellness, if it's a social issue, of just being like, hey, you know what? Yeah, math is hard. Honors math is tough, and Mr. Sullivan's a very approachable guy. It could be, actually, Carl, maybe I'll turn it over to you for some of the, ins and outs of the building, what the protocols are in terms of connecting for extra help on that.
Yeah, no, like some of what we've been doing with some of our other classes is teachers have been coming in early for some extra help, particularly with math. So that's absolutely a possibility. And just as Jack was saying, I think it's important to destigmatize that idea of like asking for help. If we're looking for baby steps, an email is always an easy way to do it. Hey, I'm wondering if I could come in early to meet you, and they can find a day. I know Mr. Sullivan's one of the first people in the building, so I'm sure for that particular instance, that wouldn't be an issue. But for any other parents that were wondering about the same thing, asking for help is something we want. We want our students asking our teachers for help, and if it's not something that can be done over Teams or what have you, then we can find other ways to make it happen for sure.
Yeah, because just to jump in there, the building opens at 7:30 and the boys don't go to homeroom until 7:50. So that is a 20-minute period when I definitely see, I have done some extra help during that time. I have seen other teachers doing extra help during that time. And if it's already Connor's homeroom, that makes it even easier.
I think sort of to wrap it all up, or wrap up this question at least, extra help is something that we've always prided ourselves on, and especially with our freshman team building those connections, it's something that we want to do, and I think that we're really good at. So again, it's like, as soon as those connections are made with any specific teacher, it's like, hey, we're going to find a way to do it. If the Zoom doesn't work, then we'll do this. If that doesn't work, then we'll do before school, and sort of go down the list. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Any other questions or anything we didn't cover?
I think you're on mute, Mrs. Tobin. Oh. Oh, your sound's not working. You could type it into the chat.
I had a question. Well, Kate is typing. Are there going to be any opportunities for full class time together? I know that was Academy Day, but now that there's no Academy Day, because I know not seeing half your class is part of not seeing half your family, your friends. So
yeah, that was for me, obviously we did a lot of work on Academy Days over the summer, and that was by far the number one thing that students said they enjoyed most about Academy Day, is being able to see students from the other house that they don't normally get to see. The best place for that now, unfortunately, is really only through the extracurricular activities. Obviously, the hope is we're moving towards, while the numbers aren't looking great in Boston, we're obviously always reevaluating, reassessing to figure out what makes the most sense for our community. You know, it's tough, I think, especially for freshmen right now, because really the only cohorts of red and silver that are mixed are those varsity sports, unless I'm wrong even there, Jack, right? I think our varsity sports are mixed. So unfortunately, it is like one of the areas in which like we haven't really found a way to bridge that. It's something we know is really important to the boys, but we haven't really come up with a solution right now, unfortunately.
One thing that we did in theology was for a maze project in October, the boys were put into a group project, and one of the people in their group was someone from their cohort, either, you know, red or silver, and the other half of their group was in the opposite cohort. And that was so much fun for me to see them communicating with people they possibly had never met in person before. And as many of you probably heard about, they had an assignment to have a discussion over Teams video chat. And that was hilarious to see because they had to press record for 2 minutes of their discussion. And it was just so fun to see the boys, you know, interacting in a casual but also academically focused way about their project that they had all worked on in person, but on different days. So I'm hoping that I can share sort of that experience with other teachers as well to say, what are some of these really strange but exciting ways of using technology to connect kids across cohorts? Obviously, a 1 week project, I'm under no illusion that that's going to create a lifetime bond between students, but it's one way of many ways that we're trying to sort of piece together the community during this time.
And I mean, for what it's worth, I think it's worth stating as well that like the goal of all in person is something that everybody wants. And I think there have been a lot of, you know, and again, I can share that there have been a lot of conversations and a lot of like, well, you know, brainstorming, what could we do? When would we do it? How would we do it? As Carl said earlier, you know, like the time's not right now, but that doesn't mean that there hasn't been conversations of, you know, what if and how could and all those things. So it is the season of perpetual hope. Like we'll lean into that, and hopefully we, you know, here's to hope. And there's another question in. Oh yeah, so Kate's point that it's a great way to connect people through Teams. We've got about 5 minutes left. We probably have time for one more question. If there's something, you know, something burning that we didn't cover today that we could touch on. One minute when you're waiting for a question on Zoom always feels like about 15. I'm just like, I got to play some Jeopardy music right now. On that note, I just want to thank all of my colleagues for joining me today. I want to thank all of the parents for joining this call as well. You know, it is a non-traditional year. I look forward to the time that we can have you all in the building and that we can be doing some of these things in person because it's special. Your kids are doing some unbelievable things right now and overcoming some really challenging obstacles, and we are happy to be along their journey with them. So thank you for everything that you're doing at home to support the work here. If you have any questions, you've got a great team of people here who would love to help answer them and work with you for whatever we can do. So thank you very much, everyone. Have a fantastic holiday season, and we look forward to speaking again soon.